hearing from another really excellent example of a program that engages communities, in particular youth, in World Heritage, and that's Go for BioDiv. So I think we'll have a fascinating session, building on some of the conversations that we've had earlier. I should have started by introducing myself. I'm Jessica Brown, and I am a longtime member of WCPA, chairing its working group specialist group on protected landscapes and seascapes. I run a small foundation, and then I also, on a part-time basis, have been consulting with the UNDP GEF Small Grants Program on Compact. And I would like to let Terrence introduce himself, and then I'll just run through the demo quickly.
I'll be the first speaker, and I work with GEF Small Grants Program, UNDP, on Compact, and background is in ecology and previously worked with UNESCO, so in a sense I've seen this partnership grow from perspective to UN agencies as well.
So just to take a quick minute to give you a sense of the structure of our session, and we're really grateful to have the community-minded space for this session. We will start with an overview of the Compact model, and Terrence will provide that for us. And then we're going to hear some examples from the field, from staff of Compact and SGP, who are working in three of the 9 countries where Compact is active. So first we'll be hearing from Balloon Raswaramana, and Balloon, how did I do? I know that last name is tricky. Balloon is the national coordinator for the UNDP GEF Small Grants Program. She has also been very closely involved with developing the Compact initiative in Madagascar, and she played a lead role in the Protected Areas Agency's review of governance types in Madagascar. We heard from her last night in a very stimulating session on governance, so she will bring that special perspective. Bonifacio Tobias is the local coordinator for the SGP Compact program in the Philippines, and he will come next, and he will be giving us a little bit of insight in his work in the Palawan World Heritage Site in the Philippines, and sharing with us a photo story that brings out some of the voices of indigenous communities in that site. Next, we'll hear from a Compact partner, and that's Nellie Katzen. Nellie is the executive director of the Southern Environmental Association, and she's also deputy focal point for World Heritage for Belize. She's had a great deal of experience also with governance, in this case with collaborative management, in the role that her organization, SEA, plays in co-managing several of the marine protected areas in the Belize Barrier Reef System. Then I'll jump in with a short review of some of the lessons learned from the Compact experience. We'll have time for a few questions. Then we'll hear from Verena Schreber, and she's the youth coordinator for Go for BioDiv, and its International Youth Forum. And we'll have time again for a little Q&A, and then we have some respondents who are coming in. I think because both of these initiatives are so connected to World Heritage and to this critical question of engaging local communities in World Heritage, sustaining sustainable development, promoting sustainable development, it's really timely and helpful that we can have perspectives both from someone from the UNESCO World Heritage Center and someone from IUCN's Global Protected Areas Program working on World Heritage. So that would be Guy Demonet, the Chief of the Special Projects Unit of the World Heritage Center, and then we'll hear from Tim Badman of the World Heritage Program and IUCN Global Protected Areas Program, and then we'll have some time, I hope, for discussion. So let me turn it over to Terrence. Thank you.
So I will review some of the institutional background of the way in which this particular partnership has evolved around 8 World Heritage sites globally. The original genesis of this idea came when the UN Foundation took an interest in the work of UNESCO and World Heritage, and UNDP and UNESCO combined had workshop in Costa Rica to think about a program which could really explore the interface between sustainable local communities and World Heritage Sites. And I guess because UNF was founded by Ted Turner and CNN, they were very concerned about the visibility of the communication side of things, and it was noted in a way that many World Heritage Sites, simply populations didn't know that they were living in a World Heritage Site, and yet it was very famous internationally. And so one of the first objectives was actually literally to raise awareness of the importance of the World Heritage Site locally, and a set of objectives about involving communities and using a grant-making mechanism to bring them into the co-management of the site. I think it was still language, this was pre-Durban, pre-World Parks, so that's more about co-management. But in the end, this is really a program about the governance effectiveness of sites. And I think the original target was to have about 15 grants per World Heritage Site. As you'll see, we actually way exceeded that. I think we may have had 400 grants over 8 sites. So most of these objectives have been achieved. The hardest one, of course, being the third one on showing that community actions can really reduce threats to protected areas. And the methodology that was developed had a very strong component of a baseline assessment to look at the socioeconomic and other threats facing these sites. The 15-year vision that you see mentioned there was very important, because those people who got together in the year 2000 basically recognized that you really can't achieve sustainable development in a 3 or 4 year periods and capacity building and these things. So we're actually pretty fortunate to have had we call it an experiment that has lasted 12 years. We had a first phase of 5 years and another 7 years. We're now in that 12th year, and we'll pass around some postgrad flyers for the lesson learning publication that we are developing, which we hope will be ready for the flagship event of the 40th anniversary of the World Heritage Convention in November in Kyoto, Japan. So the delivery mechanism for small grants is based on the grant-making mechanism developed by the funding from the GF, using voluntary expertise at the national level to review and improve concepts and projects. And basically what Compact did is it took a national approach of SGP and applied it to protected areas, so that rather than NGOs and CBOs applying for national projects, they would do so specifically for that landscape. But the program is hosted within this wider initiative, which was actually launched at Rio +20, and we have some memory sticks at the end with some additional information on the Jeff Small Grants program for those of you that are interested. That's the spread of the SGP projects globally. We selected 8 countries for Compact, and the first 6 were selected on the basis of kind of ecosystem types. I won't say a lot about, we'll hear more in more detail about each of the 3 of the individual cases in a moment. But we did actually select some of the more famous World Heritage Sites. So by selecting Mount Kilimanjaro, the idea was to try and develop a very good working model for a site which was very iconic in Africa and globally. But also these are sites with large areas, large populations. Some of them have multiple designations. Some of them are also biosphere reserves, which was also something that did actually fit in quite well with this idea of experimentation with local grants and the like. So the local consultative body was the mechanism that was set up by partnering with the protected area authorities, local government, NGOs that were based in the protected area to review concepts. And although that LCD has evolved differently in some of the different sites, it has remained the sort of decision-making mechanism close to the site, which we feel, after a few days of being here at the World Conservation Congress and Knowledge Cafe and the like yesterday, may be something that we would like to see as a legacy of this program towards this engagement of communities and sustainable development questions at the site level, and potentially maybe next to the committee could be looking at this in more detail. But briefly, with the selection of the sites, we had mountain ecosystems, coast, islands, transboundary sites, as well as a tentative this nomination site from Madagascar, a large mosaic landscape. So I mentioned the baseline assessment. The next stage was a participation planning for conceptual model of the main threats. Initially on the left you see, I think the which slide that was, I think, conceptual model, which was a one-off exercise, which in a sense conceptual models change. So like the management plan to prepare at a particular point in time, but that was the exercise which identified the niche for community-based actions with a site strategy attached to that conceptual model. And what we're trying to review now is how that evolved in practice. And in fact, each of these elements ended up a little bit different in each site. So in some cases, in the Philippines, you have existing protected area management boards which engage with local populations, and others maybe have more paternalistic protected area managers that mobilize populations in different ways, and we're trying to track and capture that. So that was very briefly that there's an example of the threat ranking, of looking at where in a particular landscape, where were the key opportunities for community-based actions through a range of different projects, whether it was conserving agro-biodiversity through livelihoods or handicrafts or reducing pressure on the biomass of the forest in Mount Kenya through biogas and alternative energy projects and lots and working in schools. So if we had time, we would hear from all of the sites and how each one is different. But most of them have ended up with this ecology of grant making, if you want to call it that way, of a demand-driven set of projects, often in clusters. So in Mexico, we won't hear more. We don't have a colleague from Mexico, but this is one of the very mature examples of the way in which projects which were funding forest certification, like on the bottom left you see there, that's a project which has a community-managed ejido, which basically supplies sustainably certified wood to the honey producers. They also get a grant for improving the beehive, because traditional Mayan culture has a tradition of honey production with logs, but they've designed new hives working with the other projects. And I think you could go on in that way, describing the way in which these different grantees have worked side by side and learn from one another. And that's actually a key lesson that most of these sites have sort of created a network of stakeholders. You could even call them champions in some cases for the World Heritage Site. And that's what we mean by the emergent sort of learning by doing results. We didn't have this in the log frame at the beginning of saying X amount of this, that, or the other. It was more of a structured experimentation to see whether what would happen if you adopted this approach. And then ideally, we would now go back and review the baseline and do a very evidence-based type of review. And in some cases, we did use aerial photography to establish the baseline. In others, we don't actually have that. Speed up a little bit. One of the key things that really came out from the demand from the ground was projects on awareness, but the importance of culture and traditional knowledge. And there you see a whole range of bilingual publications in Spanish and Mayan language. I don't think any other project had done this in Mexico when we came back with this. But those are fairly scientific publications about reptiles and biodiversity, which are available to all the local schools in the Mayan University in this part of Mexico. Very briefly, this is for those of you in other presentations I haven't mentioned before. We also have projects now which are developing community-based systems for assessing forest carbon, which are tapping into the voluntary REG Plus market with hotels. And the difference between the large global spread arrangements where you have maybe a global buyer. This would actually be working with the local hotels, so that there is a face-to-face relation, which I think is quite exciting in terms of the way in which visitors to World Heritage sites can actually go and see, if you're visiting that particular site, you can go and see where the carbon credits of that particular business is being reinvested into the landscape. Just one or two more slides. Here's the latest sort of innovation in the M&E model of being able to track the results through the conceptual model, which you can actually see on a computer and track in real time. And lastly, in 2007, we partnered with Conservation International to try and address the transition of many of the groups we work with grants, but maybe had small businesses that were dependent in some way on the World Heritage Site to provide them with some biodiversity-friendly soft capital. And this was a quite complex project with a loan guarantee to reduce the risk of this particular program to invest in these SMEs. We learned some lessons that this is really not easy. Many banks and so on will not fund very small organizations, and there are reasons for that. We could talk more about it. But we had a series of business development support grants in each of these, well, not in all of them, but in most of the World Heritage Site, which hopefully will grow some of these indigenous and local businesses. I will hand over now.
Handing over to Balloon. Your turn. Surprise! It's not working? Yeah, we'll probably getting to the next.
Okay, so we'll come back to that if we save that.
Can you close out of that?
Close this one. So the next presentation will be by the National Coordinator Balloon from Madagascar.
In Madagascar, we have a compact program in the southwest of the country. The vision of the program is the integrity of the potential World Heritage sites, potential instead of the 7 other countries. In Madagascar, we have 2 sites which we hope will be in the list of World Heritage Sites next years in the southwest of Madagascar. So the integrity of the potential World Heritage Sites in the southwest of Madagascar is maintained with local communities as key stakeholders in the landscape approach in 2020, because we have a 15-year vision, as Karen said. So the 2 sites in the landscape, in the north of Julia, we have a complex IKEA with dry forest, rivers, lakes, and marine areas with more than 80% endemic fauna and flora. We have the stakeholders are Madagascar National Parks, which is the national agency for protected areas, and 44 community sites supported by Compact since 2008. The second site is the Tsimana-Pensus protected area with forests, lakes, rivers, marine areas with more than 80% endemic fauna and flora, with sacred sites, caves, pasture, and the main stakeholders are also Madagascar National Parks and 35 community sites supported by Compact till 2008. So we have the landscape here and the sites supported by Compact. To have a view of these magnificent biodiversity in a hotspot set. Amen. So we have fauna and flora of the southwest of Madagascar, but they are under threats with slash and burn for agriculture, charcoals, bushfires, illegal hunting and wood extraction, overfishing in the marine area, and we have, unfortunately, political instability in the country, which is a big threat. So these are the threats in these sites. So what are the strategies run by the compact? First, we promote community-based management of natural resources with local empowerment of the local, traditional local communities. And more than 90% of our grantees are community-based organizations. We support also, at the same time, in